Hello. Yeah, it's me. And it's not just my hands. Oh man, this green screen. Okay. Anyway, I tried. Quick intro before we start the video. So this is the first video about the new starter decks. So I'm going to be doing 8 videos. I'm going to be doing 4 with the starter decks as they come in the deck. I'm going to be playing against the Passage Through Mirkwood with the starter decks. And I'm going to be going over the mechanics of the deck. So it's not about beating Passage Through Mirkwood. I'm thinking you don't need to see that. I want to go over the mechanics of the decks, how the decks work, cards to look for in your opening hands, maybe possible rules questions you're going to have while you're playing them. I'm going to try to anticipate those kinds of questions. And then, of course, comment below if you have a question that I didn't answer. This first video, the Dwarf video here, I'm going to really slow down. I'm going to try to make it more of a learn to play, focus on the action windows, timings, rules, and then the next 3 videos I'm going to probably play a little faster, not focus on stopping to explain the framework of the quest. Basically, I'm just going to be focusing more on the mechanics of the deck. Because I'm going to be focusing on the mechanics of the deck, I'm going to add a couple cards to my opening hand to make sure I have those cards so I can talk about them. I want to be able to have cards that I think are going to cause rules questions, or at the very least, these are the cards that you need to make the deck work the best. So again, these first 4 videos, it's not so much can I beat Passage Through Mirkwood, it's how do you play the deck. But then the next 4 videos, what I'm going to do is take each of the decks and I'm going to do a little bit of deck building. So I might take the cards that came with the starter packs, and or I'm going to take cards from the core set and I'm going to build a deck, and I'm going to take that deck up against Journey Along the Anduin, second quest in the core set. And for that one, it's going to be a true game. I'm not going to put any cards in my opening hand. We're just going to see if I can make a deck with each of these starter decks to take on the second quest in the core set. All right, a couple more things. If you watch the videos, you might notice I use things that you don't have. That's swag. So Cardboard of the Rings has a Patreon, and we are fully funded, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody who has helped us with Patreon. I get always nervous talking about money. I don't like doing it, but I just wanted to say we are fully funded, and so the money is just pouring into the swag, and the swag is going to be awesome. I have one here that I don't ever use in my playthrough, so we had this box made and then custom art with 3 deck boxes in it. So what I want to say about the swag is a lot of times when we reveal it, which will be in October, there are lots of people who say, how do I get this? How do I get this? So this is me trying to tell you this is how you get it. So if you start supporting us now at the $5 an episode tier, from now until October, you will get the swag sent to you. I can't tell you what it is. We keep it a surprise. So I'm just going to give the hint that I gave on the podcast that John and I gave during our live stream, and that is while I'm playing the game, if you see something I'm using and you're like, boy, that looks really cool, you're going to like the swag we're making this year. That's the best hint I can give you. So just trying to help all the players out there who always ask us, how can I get this stuff? This is how. You can support us and we will ship it to you. You won't even have to pay shipping. We've made enough money, we will pay for shipping. So all the money you put towards the COTR podcast will just help you get the awesome swag. Let's see. What else did I want to talk about? For the videos, I'm going to be doing them in the order of complexity. So I'm going to take the starter deck that I think is the least complex, and then I'm going to go through the 4 decks and end with the deck that I think is the most complex. And that order is, we are going to start out with Dwarves, followed by Gondor, and then we'll take on the Sylvans, and then finally the Might of Rohan. Okay. Okay, enjoy the video. Like I said, this one's going to be a little longer, more of a how to play. But I hope you enjoy this series. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. All right, here we go. Let's check out the dwarf mechanics from the Dwarves of Durin starter deck. So here you can see some of the swag I was talking about earlier. So like this awesome first player token, the die, the encounter playmat with the tracker numbers and the tracker rings. So this spiky ring will be keeping track of the threat in the staging area, and then the dwarven ring will be keeping track of the dwarves' willpower. as we commit them to the quest. All right, so if we look at the rule book, I don't have the revised set, so this is the old rule book, but we're going to follow the how to set up a game portion. So first you draw your hand after placing down your heroes, and then you set up the quests. And that matters in some quests. You need to make sure you have your hand before you set up the quests. I also have this awesome logbook from the Vision of the Palantir blog that is ran by Dan, aka Durin's father. And this is a great way to keep track of the games you've played. And within it, there is a timing chart. And you can find this timing chart on the official FFG website. You can download it for yourself and print it off, or you could buy one of these logbooks from Dan. He has a few left. So I will be referencing this timing chart as we play. I'm going to take my time through the first couple rounds and point out where we are exactly in this timing chart, when you can do actions. And it's just a real helpful guide for new players. So you will be seeing me hold this up to the camera, or maybe I'll put a graphic on the screen and show you exactly where we are. All right, let's take a look at our heroes. We will start with Biffer. He has 7 threat, noted by that 7 up top, then 2 willpower, 1 attack, 2 defense, 3 hit points, and then Dwarf, and then action. Pay 1 resource from a hero's resource pool to add 1 resource to Biffer's resource pool. Any player may trigger this ability, limit once per round. He's a great hero for this video because that is just a standard action, and so I'm going to be able to say, like, this is an action window where you could trigger this ability. And then in the bottom left corner, you could see he is lore. So he can only use his resources to pay for lore cards. And like any hero, he can spend his resources for neutral cards. Let's take a look at our second hero. This is Ori. He's 8 threat, 2 willpower, 2 attack, 1 defense, 3 hit points. He's a dwarf, and if you control 5 dwarf characters at the beginning of the resource phase, draw an additional card. Dwarves have 2 gimmicks. One is you want to control 5 of them, and one is mining your deck for cards that help you. So he is very good when you have 5 dwarves, because drawing 2 cards instead of 1 at the beginning of each turn is super duper helpful. Speaking of super duper helpful, we have a leadership dwarf, Dine Ironfoot. He is 11 threat, 1 willpower, 2 attack, 3 defense, 5 hit points, dwarf noble, and while Dine Ironfoot is ready, dwarf characters get +1 willpower and +1 attack. That's table wide. It doesn't say dwarfs you control. It's all dwarfs. So if your friend is playing a deck that also has dwarfs on the table, those dwarves are getting boosted as long as Dine is not exhausted. The next thing we do is set our starting threat. So when we add up the threat of the 3 heroes, we get 26, which is very good. That is a very good starting threat. Mid to high 20s is a good goal for your heroes. The more threat a hero has, usually the more powerful the hero is. So hopefully you can handle more enemies earlier in the game, but a low starting threat really saves you a lot of hassle in the early game. Okay, let's look at the opening hand. Remember, I did stack the deck a little bit and made sure a couple key cards are in my opening hand here so I can talk about the dwarf mechanics. The first card we see is Thor's Map, an attachment that helps us in the travel phase. We have Glowin', so a nice dwarf ally. We have the Legacy of Durin, probably one of the most important cards you want to mulligan for. We have a Very Good Tale. That's a card that helps you get more allies in play. We Are Not Idle is an acceleration card. And then a Cheap Dwarf. That's probably the other thing you want to look for in your opening hand. So you could take a mulligan here. You would shuffle all 6 cards back in and draw again if you didn't like your opening hand. I would say Legacy of Durin and a Cheap Dwarf you can get in on turn 1 are probably the 2 most important cards you should look for when you're playing this dwarf deck. You need to start building up that dwarf army. All right, let's go to the quest cards. So here I'm showing you the encounter sets you need to include when you build this encounter deck. And then we got nice flavor text on flies and spiders, and it tells me to add this forest spider to the staging area. He has 25 engagement, 2 threat, 2 attack, 1 defense, 4 hit points, and then a forced effect that triggers when it engages you. So that doesn't matter while it's in staging. We're also told to find the Old Forest Road. 1 threat, 3 progress to clear it, and then it has a response when we travel there. So when you add the 2 threat plus the 1 threat, we are already at 3 threat in the staging area, and then we're told to shuffle the encounter deck. So I'll give that a quick shuffle. And then we can flip the card over to 1B, 8 quest points needed, and then some very nice flavor text. All right, so we have set up the quest. I'm going to put it in that tracker. I'm going to use the die to keep track of everything. We're ready to go. This is how you start the game. And so what you do at the start of a game, let's look. So the round begins and you start with the resource phase. Resource phase begins, and then you collect your resources, you draw a card, then there's an action window, and then the resource phase ends. There are cards that say resource action, which you would only be able to play during that action window. We also have a card like We Are Not Idle. Sure, you could play that during that action window. I wanted to show this. This is a custom tracker I use in a lot of my videos, so I keep track of the resources across the top and threat on the bottom. It's nice when I'm making videos because I can do it one-handed. It sits on my playmat and I can just twist those dials instead of having to grab tokens and drop tokens down. All right, let's give each of the heroes one resource each. We're going to draw a card. It's another dwarf ally, and now we are in the planning phase. The planning phase begins, and then we have a special action window. The active player may play allies and attachments, and then we have a general action window during the other player's turn to play allies and attachments, and then the planning phase ends. So in other words, during the planning phase, when you're playing your allies and attachments, you can also play events and you can do anything that says action. And it's the only time you can do events or cards that say planning action. All right, let's get some cards on the table. So we're allowed to play attachments and allies, and we're going to start off by playing the Legacy of Durin. This is a 1-cost lore attachment. It's a condition. You attach it to a dwarf hero. It doesn't have to be a dwarf hero you control. It just says a dwarf hero, so you can play it across the table. And then response, after you play a dwarf character from your hand, exhaust the Legacy of Durin to draw a card. Now this is a trait-specific acceleration type card. Almost every trait in this game has specific cards that help you when playing that trait. In this case, this helps you draw cards, and card draw is key. Like with any game, making sure you get cards into your hand is one of the most important things, so then you have options, and this lets you draw an additional card every round if you play a dwarf character from your hand. I spent a resource from Ori's resource pool because he is lore, so he can pay for lore cards. Now we're going to spend a resource from Bifur's resource pool to play the Erebor Record Keeper. He costs 1, he quests for 1, 2 if Dine is ready, and then he cannot attack or defend, but you can spend a lore resource and exhaust him to ready a different dwarf character. He's an extremely good ally to get into play, especially on turn 1, because he's very cheap and he starts getting you towards 5 dwarves, which will trigger other cards in this deck. Since we played a dwarf from our hand, which means we had a dwarf card in our hand and we spent resources from our heroes to put it into play, we can exhaust the Legacy of Durin, which I will denote by placing a token on it, and then we draw a card. The card we draw is Narvi's Belt, an attachment. One of your primary goals when playing this dwarf deck is to get to 5 dwarf characters. If we look at Glowin, he costs 3, and he says while you control at least 5 dwarf characters, Glowin gains response. After you play Glowin from your hand, choose a hero, add 2 resources to that hero's resource pool. Well, we only have 1 leadership resource, but we also have this 0-cost leadership event, We Are Not Idle. It says action, exhaust X dwarf heroes to add X resources to a hero's resource pool and draw a card. So let's talk about 0-cost events for a moment. If you have a 0-cost event, you still need a resource match. So in this case, you'd need a leadership hero in order to play this card. Also, this says add X resources and draw a card. You can choose to exhaust 0 dwarf heroes, which means you would get 0 resources, but you would get to draw a card. So it is a way to get through your deck a little faster. In the interest of showing you how dwarf mechanics work, I'm going to do something I probably wouldn't do against a quest where it's a little tougher of a first turn, but in this case, I think it's okay to do it. So I am going to play We Are Not Idle. I'm going to exhaust 2 of my dwarf heroes and place 2 resources on Dine and then draw a card. We draw a nice, cheap dwarf ally. Now, I have 3 resources on Dine and I can afford Glowin. So I'm going to play Glowin, spending 3 leadership resources to put him into play. As soon as he enters play, I control 5 dwarfs. Glowin says, while you control at least 5 dwarf characters, response, after you play Glowin from your hand, add 2 resources to a hero's resource pool. I control 5 dwarfs as soon as he enters play, so that means I do get to trigger his response. Responses are always optional. I don't have to do a response, but of course there's no reason not to. So I am going to put 2 resources right back on Durin. I now control 5 dwarves, which is fantastic. Assuming I don't lose any, I'll get to draw an additional card when I start the next round. Because I control 2 allies, I can take another action and play a very good tale. It costs 0, leadership, action, exhaust 2 allies you control to shuffle your deck and then discard the top 5 cards. Put up to 2 allies discarded by this effect into play under your control. The total cost of the allies put into play cannot exceed the total cost of the allies exhausted by this effect. So this is how you can really explode your board state with dwarves. So I have 2 allies, they cost a total of 4, and now I'm going to shuffle my deck and we're going to discard the top 5 cards, and we're going to see if I discard 2 allies that have a combined cost of 4. There are also cards in this deck that get benefits from being discarded. So I am really hoping I discard a card or 2 that gets a benefit from being discarded from my deck in addition to putting allies into play. This is a really fantastic archetype to get an ally swarm into play on turn 1. When playing a dwarf deck, and honestly when playing any deck, you really need to make sure you're discarding cards in the right order because there are cards that interact with your discard pile. So our first card that gets discarded is a 3-cost dwarf ally, another copy of Glowin. He's unique, so you only can have 1 in play. Another 3-cost ally, a copy of We Are Not Idle, and then our final card is Cram. Unfortunately, this was not a very good pull. We're only able to put in 1 ally because Bomber and the Longbeard Elder cost a total of 6, and we only exhausted 4 resources worth of allies. We also are not discarding any cards that help us from being discarded from our deck. But we do get another ally into play. So for our first turn of the game, we have managed to put 3 allies into play, which I feel is really good. And if we had gotten a little lucky with a very good tale, we could have had even more cards in play and more resources. The Longbeard Elder has a response that says, after Longbeard Elder commits to the quest, he gets a look at the top card of the encounter deck, and if it's location, he places 1 progress on the quest, and if it's not a location, he gets -1 willpower. All right, so let's go into the quest phase. All right, so you begin the quest phase. There's an action window at the beginning of it, and then you commit characters to the quest. Then there's an action window, and then you do the staging, which is revealing encounter cards, followed by an action window. And then you do the resolution of the quest, which is where you compare your willpower to the threat in staging, and then place your progress tokens. Then there's an action window, and then the quest phase ends. So let's talk about the important rules during the quest phase. When you commit characters to the quest, you commit them all at the same time. So in this case, I'm only committing the Longbeard Elder, but if I was committing anybody else, I would exhaust them at the exact same time. The Longbeard Elder has a response. I get to look at the top card of the encounter deck. So responses, of course, are triggered off of some effect. So in this case, committing him to the quest is that trigger. So you do this immediately. Since the top card of the encounter deck is a location, he does not lose a willpower, and I get to place a progress on the quest. That's very nice. The Longbeard Elder is questing for 3 because Durin is ready. So Durin is boosting his willpower. So we reveal this location, and it adds 2 threat, which means we have 5 threat versus our 3 willpower. That's not great, and I don't have any way to boost my willpower. And it's important to note, it's at this moment, after staging, that you can take actions if you wanted to boost your willpower. It is also really important to know that when you are revealing encounter cards, you cannot take actions. That is not a green step. It is not an action window. Once you start revealing those encounter cards, you cannot take actions. You can only do a response, like a test of will. Actions are not allowed to be taken during the staging step, but they can be taken after the staging step is over if you want to adjust your willpower with cards like Faramir or Eowyn. Since I don't have any way to adjust my willpower, I need to raise my threat by 2. That is the difference of threat to my willpower. And then now we will go into the travel phase. So you start the travel phase, there's no action window, you have the opportunity to travel, and then there's an action window, and then the travel phase ends. So it's pretty quick. To travel to a location, sometimes locations will say there is an effect to travel there. So what you do is you leave the location in the staging area, you do whatever that effect says, and then you move that location from the staging area to the active location spot, which I am putting right next to my quest card. I have 2 locations to choose from. I'm going to choose the Old Forest Road, and it says response, after you travel to the Old Forest Road, the first player may choose and ready one character he controls. So this is a one-time thing. The action of moving the location from the staging area to the active location spot is traveling. So after I have traveled, I will now ready one of my characters. I'm going to choose Biffer because he's a better defender, and from this point forward, because I have an active location, anytime something tells me to place progress on the quest, I have to put it on the active location first. The active location is a buffer, so this would be Tactics Legolas, the Longbeard Elder. Anything that says place a progress on the quest, you would first put on the active location, but because I am currently at this location, it no longer contributes its threat to the staging area. So we removed one threat from staging, but we have added a buffer of 3 progress before we can start placing progress on the quests. We are now in the encounter phase. So the encounter phase begins. We can optionally engage an enemy, and then there's an action window, and then we engage any enemies that we have to, then there's an action window, and then the encounter phase ends. Okay, so my threat is 28, and the forest spider has an engagement of 25, so I'm going to have to engage it. But I can choose to optionally engage it. That means I grab it from the staging area and it engages me. Or I can just skip optional engagements and have it engage me normally. Either way, the forced effect triggers because it says after it engages a player. Doesn't matter how it engaged you. Doesn't matter if it was a player card that made it engage you. However it engages you, it gets that effect. Engaging you is when an enemy moves from one area of the game to the player's area. Now that it is out of the staging area, it is no longer contributing its threat, so we have now removed that threat from the staging. It is not a looming threat, it is a current threat, and the staging area is supposed to represent threat in the distance, threat you're worried about, threat that hasn't seen you yet. So now that the encounter phase is over, we go into the combat phase, and it's probably the most daunting to look at. There's just so many action windows, they're green, they're red, there's all these different steps, but for the most part, everything is green. So after you do any of the steps, you get an action window. And that's important because it's basically like deal a shadow card, now you can take an action. Declare your defender, now you take an action. It just keeps going back and forth between each of the steps and the ability to take an action. So the easiest way to put this is if you have stuff you want to do in the combat phase, just look at the steps to do combat. After you complete one of those steps, you then can take the action, but you cannot take the action during the actual step. For example, when a shadow card is flipped over and it tells you deal 1 damage to the defending character, you can't take an action before resolving that shadow effect. You can take an action after it, you can take an action before it. But once you've decided to flip over the shadow card and resolve its effect, you have to take that damage. If that kills a character, you just lost your defender and now the attack is undefended. So you need to anticipate any actions you're going to want to take before you start doing any of these steps. And I would just suggest having one of these guides next to you and just look at the steps and follow them to the letter. And you do each enemy's attack individually. So you start the attack, you go through the whole defending process. At the end of that, the defense is done. So anything that says after this character defends, that's when you would trigger it. And then you start the process over again for the next enemy you're engaged with. You get to choose which enemy you start getting attacked by. And then you start the player attack part. And it's basically the exact same thing. Now you're the attacker, and there's the steps you follow, and in between each of those steps, you can take an action. So if you have an event that boosts your attack until the end of the phase, you can play it in any action window prior to 6.8.2. As long as you boosted your attack strength prior to the determine your attack strength step, that was an eligible action window for you to have done that. I know it's a lot. I know it might be kind of confusing. My best advice is to watch other people play videos of the game or to ask questions on the Facebook groups and Discord. But for the most part, it's really take a step, you can do an action. Take a step, you can do an action. And we just go from there. Okay, back to the game. So the combat phase begins. The first thing you do is deal out the shadow cards. Now you have the opportunity to take any combat actions. We have declared Biffer our defender. We flip the shadow card. There is no shadow, so there is no line with a little skull. So if we look at the attacking enemy, he has a shadow, but he was not the shadow card. So you don't resolve the shadow effect of the attacking enemy. You resolve the shadow effect on the card that you flipped up. So you might as well look at a card like this. You cover up the text, and anything below the shadow line you would do. If there's no shadow line, the entire card is considered blank. You only look at the text underneath the shadow line. All right, Bifur's defense to the attacking spider's attack of 3 is a difference of 1. Bifur's going to take 1 wound. Since we are not engaged with any other enemies, the defense part of combat is over. We now go to the player attack, and then Dine Ironfoot is ready. He attacks for 2, and the spider's defense is 1, so Dine does 1 damage. So combat, it looks confusing, but if you break it down step by step, it's not that bad. All right, we are now into the refresh phase. So the refresh phase begins. You're ready, everybody. You raise your threat by 1. You pass the first player token. Then there's an action window. And then the refresh phase ends. So it's important to note that if something told you could not ready a character until the end of the round, they skip that ready all cards 7.2. So they would go into the next round exhausted. And there's also an action window after you raise your threat. So you have to raise your threat, and then you could take an action to reduce your threat with something. So it's important to look at that refresh phase. Don't just gloss over it. It can definitely change how certain cards get played. And I want to point out here, sometimes people ask rules questions because they don't see it in the rule book. If you don't see it in the rule book, you probably don't do it. So I've seen people ask, do you return the enemy to the staging area? That would be spelled out. That would be a pretty big rule. And so since it says nothing about returning that enemy to the staging area, you don't. I've seen people ask questions about how many cards can you have in your hand or how many allies can you have in play. If the rulebook doesn't tell you a limit, there is none. So don't be afraid to ask those kind of questions in forums and social media platforms. But if it's a pretty big framework rule, like returning enemy to the staging area after combat is done, and it's not in the rulebook, then you probably don't do it. They're not going to put everything you don't do in the rule book. They're just going to put everything that you do. do. All right, we went through our first turn. Everybody's ready. We raised our threat. Now we're going to collect our resources. So everyone gets 1. And because I control 5 dwarf characters, I get to draw 2 cards instead of just 1. So the 2 cards I draw are a Gandalf and then an Erebor Hammersmith. Erebor Hammersmith is pretty cool. When he enters play because you played him from your hand, he gets to return the topmost attachment in your discard pile to your hand. So if I had used a very good tail and found an Erebor Hammersmith, his ability would not trigger because it's after you play him. If a very good tail had put him into play, I didn't play the Erebor Hammersmith. The event did. This also works for Legacy of Durin. Legacy of Durin says after you play a dwarf character from your hand. So again, doing a very good tail to get those allies in wouldn't trigger Legacy of Durin. It's only if you play it from your hand. Okay, so we're going to play the Erebor Hammersmith. I have to spend 2 lore resources to do that, so Bifur and Ori can afford that. And now let's look. So Erebor Hammersmith says response. After you play him, you get to return an attachment. And then Legacy of Durin says response. After you play a dwarf character from your hand, exhaust it to draw a card. Those are 2 responses. Both are optional, and both are triggering off the exact same thing. So I get to choose which one to do first. So I am going to choose to return Cram to my hand. It's a nice way to ready a hero. And then now I'm going to exhaust Legacy of Durin to draw the top card, and we get a song that is a boost card for a dwarf hero. All right, cool. Let's play Cram, 0 cost leadership event. So I'll put that on Dine Ironfoot. I can discard it to ready him during any action window. And then looking at my hand, Narvi's Belt isn't really that useful. Thor's Map is really good. It lets you avoid the travel cost of a location. And we have a location up in staging that has a pretty nasty travel cost. But I don't have a lore resource, so I'm going to take Bifur's action and move Dine's resource to his resource pool. I now have a lore resource to afford Thor's Map, which is really good right now. And I'm putting that token on Bifur to indicate I've already used his ability since it's limit once per round. Tokens like that help me remember I have already triggered it so I don't trigger it twice on accident. Now we're in the quest phase. We only have 2 threat up in staging, and this time lots of ready dwarfs. So I think taking the first turn hit with questing was well worth it because now we're in an excellent place and we should be able to place quite a bit of progress. So because Dine is ready, he is boosting everybody's willpower, and you commit all the characters at the exact same time. Now I get to look at the top card. It is not a location, so the Longbeard Elder gets -1 willpower. But the important thing to note there is I committed everybody at the exact same time before I flipped that card. So you can't look at that card and then decide what's being revealed, and that might give you information about who to send on the quest. For example, if it was a treachery that dealt 1 damage to all your exhausted characters, I might not want to send the Erebor Record Keeper because he would die. But I don't have a choice. I have to send everybody at the exact same time. All right, I am sending 10 willpower. The Longbeard Elder let me know I'm going to have 2 attacks I have to deal with this round. So the spider adds 2 more threat. So that means I have 4 against my 10. I'm going to place 3 on the active location, and then the rest spills over onto the quest. So we're going to place 3 more progress, giving us a total of 4. Now we are in the travel phase. We want to travel to this Mountains of Mirkwood, and it says travel, reveal the top card of the encounter deck, and add it to the staging area to travel here. So revealing a card off of the encounter deck means you have to trigger everything on that card. Surge, Doomed, whatever it says, you have to do. When revealed effects, you reveal it. Anything that says add it to the staging area, so like search the encounter deck for an enemy and add it to the staging area. Add it means you do not do any when revealed type stuff or keywords like Surge and Doomed. I have Thor's map, and Thor's map lets me make a location the active location without traveling there. You basically just pick up the location and it is now the active one, and if there was an active location, that's now back in the staging area. So you get to skip the traveling effect. You're not traveling there, you just made it the active location. I have to discard the map to do that, but it's well worth it because I get to skip a card being revealed. The other half of the Mountains of Mirkwood has to do with when it's explored. So once we put enough progress on there to explore it, we get to trigger the second half of the text. All right, we're in the engagement phase. This spider has to engage us. Doesn't matter which way. We can optionally engage it, or we can wait for it to come down naturally. Now they each get a shadow card. So the one spider is attacking for 2, and the one we just engaged is attacking for 3. I'm going to have the Erebor Hammersmith defend the one attacking for 3. There's no shadow. So it was 3 against his 1 defense. He's going to take 2 wounds, and he has 3 hit points, so he is still alive. And now we have an attack of 2. I really want to kill one of these spiders, so I'm going to have Dine defend it. There is once again no shadow, so Dine does not take any damage. And then I'm going to use Cram. I discard it to ready the attached hero. So Dine is now ready. So he is boosting Ori's attack, but I need Dine's to attack. So we're going to attack with a combined strength of 4. So you add up the total attack strength against the enemy's defense. So it was 4 attack against 1 defense, which meant we did 3 damage, which was enough to kill that spider. And now we're only engaged with 1 spider that is only going to be attacking for 2. That's not bad. All right, we go into the next round. Everybody ready? We're going to raise our threat up to 30. And we get to draw 2 cards because we still control 5 dwarfs, so that's great. Oh, we get another Thor's map. It's unique. See that little symbol? That means you only can have 1 in play at any time, so you always have to look out for that symbol. And another very good tail. I wonder if we can get better luck this time with this very good tail. I still haven't seen any of my cards that let me get a bonus from them being discarded from my deck. So there's a lot of them in my deck, so I feel like using this a very good tail, I should be able to hit one of those. And now I can exhaust 6 resources worth of allies. So exhausting 6 instead of 4 means I should be able to put in 2 allies for sure, right? Caleb made this deck, so you know it's going to work. It's going to work great. So the perfect, a very good tail would be 2 allies I put in play, and then there's an ally that if you discard it, he comes into play. So that would be 3 allies. And then there's an event that gives me money. That would be cool too. But we get Dory. Okay, he costs 3. That's good. King of the Mountain, dang. Hey, another dwarf. Great. That's a really nice event. And then a healing card. Okay, but I did discard 2 allies with a combined cost of 5. So they both come into play. The Miner of the Iron Hills, when he enters play, he discards a condition attachment. And Dory can eat the attack from an undefended attack. So if you have an undefended attack, Dory can take the damage. Okay, neither of those dwarves entered play from my hand. They were entering play from a very good tale, so I don't get to draw a card. I forgot to give myself resources, so let's do that. And now from my hand, let's spend 2 lore resources to put in the Arid Nimrus Prospector, and then he has a response. After he enters play, we're going to discard the top 3 cards of my deck, and then we get to choose any card in my discard pile and shuffle it into my deck. So that sounds good. Once again, it's a response from entering play, so I'm going to choose to trigger his response before the Legacy of Durin. We get... dang it, I like that card. Dang it, I like that card. 2 good events. And another King Under the Mountain. I really want to get King Under the Mountain into play. And once again, I have not discarded any cards that get a benefit from being discarded. Okay, well, 2 Kings Under the Mountain are now in my discard pile. And I really want to get this card into play. It really helps me with the whole discarding and mining from my deck mechanic. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to shuffle it into the deck. So... getting pretty unlucky with the random discarding of cards I want to discard, but I think you can look at this board state and not be too disappointed. All right, I get to draw a card, and it's Miner of the Iron Hills. Okay, so Miner of the Iron Hills is good if I get caught in a web. I'd like to get this other copy of Thor's map into play in case I reveal a location that has a nasty travel effect. So I'm going to once again trigger Biffer's action to move a resource. I now have a lore resource. I can spend the lore resource for Thor's map and attach it to a hero. All right, I believe we are done with the planning phase. Lots of allies in play. Let's go questing. So Dine's ready, so any dwarf gets +1 willpower. I got to remember that Glowin and the Longbeard Elder are not committed to the quest. They were exhausted for that A Very Good Tale. We have nothing in staging, so we should be able to make quite a bit of progress. And we get the Dol Guldur Beastmaster. He's a 2-threat enemy, so we have made 1, 2, 3 for the active location, and then 4 for the quest. Okay, this is important because we have made enough progress to clear the quest. So the way you actually do it is you place all your tokens down. So I placed 3 on the active location, and then 4 on the quest, and then we explore the active location. So you trigger anything on the active location being explored before you advance the quest. This says I get to search the top 5 cards of my deck for an ally and add it to my hand. Let's see what we find. Well, Gandalf is pretty great. There's another Hammersmith. There's one of the allies that gets put into play if it's discarded. We have a healing card and another Hammersmith. All right. Let's grab the Hammersmith. I already have a Gandalf in my hand, and I like the Hammersmith's ability to grab attachments out of my discard pile. All right, we have 8 progress on the quest. That was the progressing condition. If there's ever conditions like you have to kill an enemy, it's whenever the conditions of the quest card are met, that's when you advance to the next stage. The next stage, 2A, a fork in a road, nice flavor text. 2B, 2 progress needed, and then forced when we defeat the stage, advance to a random stage 3. All right, let's reset the die. We have nowhere to travel to. You still do the travel phase, so there's an action window that opens up, but nothing else happens. You have to do every phase, folks, too. Sometimes people want to skip the quest phase. You can't. You always have to reveal the card. All right, encounter phase. I don't want this guy to come down. My threat is below his engagement, so he's going to stay up there. And now I'm getting attacked for 2. And I want to make sure I can kill this guy, so I'm just doing some quick math. If I leave Dine up, do I have enough to attack for 5? I think I have it figured out. So I'm going to have Dory jump in front of this attack. And there's a good treachery to see go away. No shadow on that treachery, so it does nothing. It's just basically a blank card because there was no shadow line. And then Dory takes a damage. I'm going to do that in a minute. And Dine is boosting the attack power of the 2 dwarves I'm declaring as attackers. So we can kill that spider. And now we go into the refresh phase. And here I'm pointing out how We Are Not Idle is great to use after combat is done. Sometimes you have heroes who are ready who didn't do anything, and that's a great time to play We Are Not Idle, because then you exhaust them to get resources and draw a card. All right, there's me saying, hey, Dory, you should be hurt. Everybody readied. I raised my threat. All my attachments are ready. We pretty much have an empty board. We just have an enemy with 35 engagement. We get to draw 2 cards, so we get Cram, that goes right on Dine. Chad, 2 cards. Chad. I was just thinking about what I wanted to play this turn. Okay, let's look at the top card of my discard pile, and it's a healing card. That's an attachment there. So I'm going to play the Hammersmith, He's going to come in for 2. I get to grab the topmost attachment. It's Healing Herbs, which you attach to a lore hero, and you discard it after exhausting the attached hero to heal all damage on a character. Because I played a dwarf from my hand, I get to draw a card. It's Durin's Song, so now I have 2 copies of that. Lots of dwarves on the table. I have 2 songs in my hand that give big boosts. So if we have to fight Ungoliant Spawn, we are well prepared for it. Let's play Healing Herbs. We'll attach it to, I don't know, Biffer. He looks like he's the most studious. He would know how to heal somebody. And yeah, we're up against 2 threat. Let's go questing. Everybody's ready this time. I didn't play a very good tale, so I can send a lot of willpower on the quests. I only need to make 2 progress though, so all these dwarves are boosted. I am sending 7, and boy did I make a tactical mistake here. I did not pay attention to how many hit points these characters had that I sent, and Necromancer's Reach deals 1 damage to each exhausted character. That's going to kill the Hammersmith, and that's going to kill the Record Keeper. And because we're not allowed to take actions during the staging step, I cannot do the action on the Healing Herbs to heal the Hammersmith before he dies because of the Necromancer's Reach treachery. So I should have sent characters with more hit points. So I lost all but 3 willpower. Only Glowin's on the quest now. So that means I make 1 progress. I mean, I thought I had this for sure. So I'm not going to advance. I had all these characters ready to help me deal with Ungoliant Spawn if I had to fight her. And instead, we're still here on stage 2. All right, fine. Let's engage the Beastmaster. So when he attacks, he gets an additional shadow card. So you deal out the shadow cards first. And if I had any other enemies, they would also get shadow cards. And then when I choose him to be the enemy that is going to attack me, he gets the 2nd shadow card. So the Hammersmith's going to defend. There's the 2nd shadow card. Neither one of them have a shadow effect. So he is just attacking for his base attack. It does not quite kill the Hammersmith. He's still kicking. And then I have plenty of dwarf characters ready to take this guy out. He only takes 6 to kill. And Dine's boosting everybody's attack value as long as he's ready. And I didn't send either of my heroes on the quest. So yeah, I have plenty of attack. So we kill the Beastmaster, which means we're going to go into the next round with no encounter cards in play. I start to do the refresh phase, and then I realize because Biffer is still ready, and I have 2 damage on that Erebor Hammersmith, I'm going to trigger the effect on Healing Herbs. It doesn't hurt to exhaust him. So I'm going to exhaust him, let's say, during the combat phase, and heal the damage off of the Hammersmith. And then now we're going to go into the refresh phase. So raise my threat, everybody readies. And then we are now in the next round, so I get resources. I'm going to, there we go, 2 cards. We get another Prospector and another Gandalf. All right, I really want to discard a card that gives me a benefit from being discarded. So let's try this again. When he enters play, I get to discard the top 3 cards of my deck. Here we go. I'm feeling it, Caleb. I know you built a good deck here. I know we're going to discard something good. Well, I don't need that, so that's fine. I want that. And no. Okay, okay. I guess mining your deck just isn't working right now. All right. Now I get to shuffle a card back into my deck, so maybe I will draw it with the Legacy of Durin. So you do the whole effect of the Prospector before you trigger Legacy of Durin. So which card do I want to shuffle back into my deck? This one readies all my dwarf characters. That could be useful against Ungoliant Spawn, because I can quest and then everybody will ready and they can kill Ungoliant Spawn. So let's give everything a shuffle. And now we're going to trigger Legacy of Durin by exhausting it and drawing a card from the Prospector entering play. All right. What card do we get? Another healing card. Alrighty. Biffer, let's put that back on you. All right. This is a really good board state. I have lots of resources on Dying Ironfoot. I have Gandalf. I have those songs. Yeah, we're ready. All right. Let's go questing. I learned my lesson, so I only want to send characters that won't die if we get another Necromancer's Reach. So there's 3 willpower, then 2 from the Prospector. So that's 5. I'm up against nothing. I need to make 1 progress. Let's send 2 more. All right. And the card we reveal is, all right, there we go. 3 threat, location, Necromancer's Pass. To travel there, we got to discard random cards from our hand. Okay, so we do make the progress needed to advance to a random stage 3. So I'm going to set them out, and we're going to randomly pick one. All right, so there they are. We're going to go 1, 2, and then I have a token that has a 1 and a 2 on it. Give it a shake, and we get 2. All right, so the second option is going to be the one we go to, so let's look at that. A chosen path, nothing there, and then Bjorn's path, it's 10 progress needed, and then we cannot win the game if Ungoliant Spawn is in play. However, we don't have to go find her or anything, so we don't have to do the big fight, even though we were all ready for it. Let's use Thor's map to travel to this location without triggering the travel effect, so I don't need to discard any cards. I have nothing going on. Again, this would be a great time for We Are Not Idle, because all 3 of my heroes are ready, so I'd be able to get a whole bunch of resources. Let's go into what should be the final round of the game. Everyone's got some money. I get to draw 2 cards, and we get 2 more lore allies. Okay, King Under the Mountain just is not coming out this game. Let's play an Erebor Hammersmith. Spend my 2 lore resources. Pull back the topmost attachment, which is the map. And then Legacy of Durin, of course, draws me the card. And, okay, it's one of the cards I was hoping to get discarded off my deck. So if you ever discard that card off your deck, you get to add 2 resources to a hero's resource pool. It's very cool. I just never got lucky and discarded it. So my miners aren't very good miners. I have a lot of resources on Dying Ironfoot, so let's play another Longbeard Elder. I don't get to draw a card because I've already triggered Legacy of Durin. But now when I commit to the quests, if I commit both of them, and the top card of the encounter deck is a location, I get to place 2 progress. So that's pretty cool. And I'm going to send the team. I mean, if we make 10 progress, we win. And as long as we don't have Ungoliant Spawn come out, it's going to be a victory. We are sending 21. Let's take a peek. Okay, it's the Hummerhorns. It's not a location, so we lose 2 willpower, but we make a lot of progress. So we're going to place progress on the active location, and then the rest spills over onto the quest, and that's a win. All right. I want to look at my deck. I want to see where... There we go. Look at. There's those cards. 3 of them out of my bottom 4 were the ones I was hoping to discard. So look at this. Imagine this as a very good tail, where I would have been able to put in those 2 allies, then the 2 miners would have been able to come into play as well, and then King Under the Mountain would have been in my discard pile, which I could have shuffled back in from the Prospector entering play. So I think you can see how you can have just some really bonkers turns if those are very good tails and the cards you discard. I just didn't get lucky and discard anything fun like that. But it's a victory, and it's a fun deck, and it's very easy to pilot. It's not complicated. The combos make sense, and I think everybody will have a lot of fun with this Dwarf deck and have a lot of fun smashing this first quest. You can really take it down pretty easy. All right, everybody. Take care. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.